All right, ladies and gentlemen, World War I, first part of Unit 7, in case you missed it. Let's rock and roll, get straight into it. We're going to have another video after this about the Russian Revolution. We're going to have another one after that about 1920s and 30s totalitarian dictatorships. Oh, this is a good unit. Yeah. All right. Talking about World War I, it's too simple to say that World War I is really because of the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Wow, he went for a sandwich and he got shot, and there you go. Not the case at all. Okay, there are bigger root causes here. There are four main causes, and that's the acronym we're going to use here. Main. Militarism, the alliance system, imperialism, and nationalism. Main. Talk about each of them briefly. Militarism is the building up, the stockpiling of arms. And each of the countries of Western Europe, as well as the Russians, are engaged in a massive campaign to build up as many arms as possible prior to the war. Now, maybe you're just doing that in a preventative way, but if something happens, if you've spent a huge proportion of your national budget on defense, you might be more likely to use those weapons than to seek peaceful compromise. The alliance system. Europe sits in two armed camps. On one hand, the Germans, the Austro-Hungarians, and the Italians, and on the other hand, the British, the French, and the Russians. Those two armed camps, even one small problem between them is going to draw them into a much larger European problem. Imperialism can be a problem for a couple of reasons. Number one, it encourages the competition, right? Britain has 40% of the world's landmass in their empire. The Germans are kind of new at it, but they feel as though the British shouldn't get in their way and should allow them to have more and more empire. Right? To go with the great phrases, if the sun never sets on the British Empire, then where is Germany's place in the sun? How come you won't let us have any? That's not nice. And the second thing is that problems outside of Europe can cause problems inside of Europe in an imperialist way. So for instance, the drama over the Moroccan crisis between the French and the British and the Germans doesn't just cause trouble in Morocco, it causes trouble in France and Britain and in Germany and Europe proper. Okay? Nationalism. All these things really tie into nationalism, right? This is one big competition. We're going to prove ourselves. We're going to show that we're better than you. And in a way, the First World War gives people an opportunity for that. A chance to really showcase how fantastic they are. Now, that fantasticness is the ability to kill each other in a rather senseless fashion. Well played. Well played. Okay? Moving on, the actual events. We talked about the assassination. And after the assassination, if you're Austria-Hungary, you want blood. And you want blood because the heir to your throne just got shot. And the guy on the throne is ancient. Franz Josef has been sitting on the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire since 1848. The guy's older than Methuselah. And you know you need the heir, and now he's dead. So now you want some blood from Serbia. But you can't just go threatening them because you know if you threaten the Serbians, the Russians are coming to dinner. So, if you're Austria-Hungary, here's what you do. You go to your best friend, Germany, and you make sure that they're ready to go. Now, the Germans here give Austria-Hungary an assurance, what we call a blank check. Now, what that blank check really means is debatable. Does it mean we're in for a huge war? I don't know. Does it mean we merely support your ideas and we're going to watch while you beat up on Serbia, but if Russia comes to town, don't ask us to join? I don't know. What it ends up meaning is that Germany's ready for a big war, but whether or not that's the intent is one of those debatable issues. Okay? After Austria-Hungary has the blank check, though, they make a demand or an ultimatum on Serbia that Serbia simply cannot give up. They can't give up controlling their own country. That leads to a declaration of war against Serbia by Austria-Hungary. When Austria-Hungary does that, Russia jumps in and declares war on Austria-Hungary and Germany. Two things I want to discuss there. Number one, Russia? Wait a second. This was a Austria-Hungary, Serbia, and maybe Germany issue, and here's Russia. Right at the end of the war, we're going to label the Germans with all of the blame, and it's the Russians who really invaded and started first. How interesting. Okay? And the second thing we want to point out is that here's Russia, a country that's going to mobilize throughout the war about 10 million men, and they don't have more than one plan, right? The Russian plan is this. If we invade Austria-Hungary, we have to invade Germany. We don't have anything else. That's all we got, coach. We'll just keep doing the same thing. What if it doesn't work? Good question. We'll just keep doing it, okay? So, when Russia declares war against the Germans then declare war against the Russians, and, going with the inflexible war plan idea, declare war against the French because the Germans only have one war plan. It's called the Schlieffen Plan. And the Schlieffen Plan is designed to fight the two-front war. You take this big pincering movement around through Belgium. Wow, it would look like that on a board. You take the French out quickly because you don't think they're that big of a deal. And you set a little bit of your troops off to the side to hold off the Russians. And then, after you've defeated the French, you swirl the army together, and now the lumbering Russian bear, which you assume will come out of its cave very slowly, you go and fight them. And that's how you fight the two-front war. Now, Schlieffen's a bad idea, isn't it? Because it's not just France waiting for you over there, it's Britain. And you've known that for years, and you only had one plan. Que loco! Que loco! Okay? That's not smart. But that's what the Germans have. All right? Now, eventually, Britain gets into this war as well, and they're going to say, well, we're here to defend Belgium. Yeah, you're also here to defend your allies and your empire, so don't act all snooty and show up, will you? Okay? The mood of most people, optimistic. Everybody thinks they're going to win. And it's going to be a short war. The great line was, oh, the boys will be home before the leaves are off the trees. Yeah, because we're going to blow up the trees. Okay? Everyone will be home by Christmas. Not true at all, right? 4 years, long, arduous, horrible war. Weapons and tactics. This is an industrial war in the sense that we take old tactics. That is to say, you're the enemy and I'm going to run at you. What do you have? I have a machine gun, okay? And I have a flamethrower and a grenade launcher and big artillery like Big Bertha. And I have a Zeppelin and I have a plane where I'm going to maybe do reconnaissance work or I'm going to drop gas on you. And I have gas. Okay? And all of these fabulous things, I just said I had gas. Well done, Holliday. Okay? All of these things are used in a way that is just brutal, right? World War I is called a war of attrition. It means that we are going to spend months fighting over the same half-mile patch of ground, a no man's land, that is going to be a swirling mess of barbed wire, potholes, corpses, and unexploded shells. It is brutal. Okay? Trench warfare is no pretty thing to behold. How did it affect the mindset of the soldiers? The soldiers very quickly became disenchanted with the war effort. You can read that in their accounts. Many of them began to see the war as being a war that their government was exacting upon the population, that the population, the soldiers themselves, were not necessarily the ones at war with each other. How does the U.S. get involved in this? Well, the United States sits out the first 3 years of the war, and they do so by being a neutral nation and shipping goods to both sides, primarily to the French and British shores, I should say. Not as much to Germany and Austria-Hungary, but they do trade with both sides. When America finally gets in, it's because of a threat to American shipping and also a proposed alliance. The Germans send a note called the Zimmermann Note, or Zimmermann Telegram, down to Mexico saying, hey, why don't you invade the United States? And that way we'll pinch them in a two-front war. They'll have to fight you in Mexico and us in Europe. And the note also sets forth the fact that the Germans will return to what's called unrestricted submarine warfare. In other words, they will sink any ship getting near the English or French coast, even if it happens to be a neutral ship like the United States. This has been trouble before. Remember, the sinking of the Lusitania fell under this sort of a category. Now, if you're Germany, this is what you have to do. This seems savage, but you cannot allow American ships to continue to flood resources into those two countries. Germany is having a horrible time fighting the war. And those countries, Britain and France, are really hanging on because they have America as kind of their Costco providing all of these goods. That can't go on. When that Zimmermann note comes out, it's clear that Germany is working against us. We declare war, and we're in the war, I should say, the United States, for about a year. Let's talk about the home front, though. The total war aspect of this is really cool. Not that I want to see civilizations have to gear up for war, but I think the way in which they made the civilization almost indistinguishable from the battlefield in the sense that every individual was a combatant. Even though they might not have put on a uniform or carried a weapon, no matter who you were a significant part of the war effort. If you were a 4-year-old kid, eat your food. Don't waste it. That's how you fight the war. If you're a 90-year-old grandma, we don't expect you to pick up a rifle. We do expect you to buy war bonds. That's how we ask you to contribute. So total war is the making of the war all the way across the civilization, using all of the resources that the civilization can muster. Going down my list of things here, we have to conscript an army. No matter how much enthusiasm